Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Russia's Putin reassures President Maduro of Moscow's support after American forces seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, with Caracas condemning the move as an act of piracy. NATO Chief Mark Rutte has warned that member states are Russia's next target. And Elon Musk's SpaceX is gearing up for a record-breaking IPO that could shake up Wall Street. Now, President Putin has reassured President Maduro of Moscow's support during a phone call in the last few hours. It comes after US forces seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. On releasing a video of the seizure, Attorney General Pam Bondi said the vessel was a crude oil tanker used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. Caracas condemned the move as an act of international piracy. For more on this, I'm joined by Andreas Silva, political analyst and consultant. Andreas, great to have you back on the show with me. So we all watched the dramatic footage of US troops seizing an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. Is this a clear escalation of tensions between Washington and Caracas?
Well, it's very interesting because, as we've seen, the seize of this oil tanker is not only the first time oil has been properly introduced into this geopolitical crisis that has been happening between Venezuela and the United States, but it also shows their efforts into expanding from only attacking the boats, because as we know, these boats are small vessels, they're unarmed, or at least unarmed, to confront any big ships or any helicopters. So at this point, we're seeing how the United States government is preparing, maybe not to scale tensions towards a change in Venezuela, but they are definitely getting more pressure within the Caribbean Sea. As we know, the United States has several officials that have been starting to use keywords that were key in the Iraq crisis, such as now these drug boats are being called weapons of mass destruction for the United States people. And when we see that they are now starting to touch oil, this is just getting a little too familiar with what the Bush administration did 20 years ago.
In response to the incident, the Venezuelan government says this is an act of international piracy and it would denounce the incident to international bodies. What do you make of this, especially because the US doesn't see Maduro's government as legitimate?
Well, regardless of whatever perception we may have of the Venezuelan government, there is a legit case for Venezuelan authorities to bring this up in court. But as we've seen, it's been said by Vice President J.D. Vance, by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, the United States has little to no concern whether international courts are involved or not. The United States is currently embarking in a crusade where they are dedicated to either getting a regime change in Venezuela or to at least get some pressure on the Venezuelan government to get a very, 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 very favorable deal within their natural resources. We've seen them, Vice President J.D. Vance tweeted at one point when they were questioned about the first strikes on drug boats. J.D. Vance said that he didn't care how they called them, crimes of war, breaking with basic human rights. They didn't care. And what they've demonstrated is that they truly are not concerned by what the international community thinks about them or what.
Andreas, we just seem to have lost you on the line. We seem to have some technical problems. We're going to see if we can get Andreas Silva back. He's been speaking to me about the situation in Venezuela. I think we have Andreas back. Are you back with me, Andreas? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. I do apologize. We lost your line there briefly, but I just want to touch on something that you were saying to me and drill into this a little bit deeper. You were speaking about J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and ignoring international law. Do you think this is an extremely concerning time for the people of Venezuela? What do people make of it there?
Yes, well, the people in Venezuela are very concerned with the current geopolitical situation, even though the overlapping issue within the Venezuelan people is how the economic crisis is affecting their everyday lives. This is especially heightened by the December celebrations because the Venezuelan people are not only very religious, but they're very familiar. So the crisis usually heightens up during December. But at this time, there is the very real possibility that the United States might be rising up the pressure. And for the Venezuelan people, what is concerning is not only what actions they may take, but whether the United States is taking into account the many different paths of repercussion that may happen depending on how they execute these operations.
And what could those paths of repercussion actually look like?
Well, it would very much depend on whether the United States is willing or not to put boots on the ground in Venezuela. As we know, that is not only a very unpopular action within the United States. More than 60% of Americans have said that they do not agree with any international intervention. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump ran as an anti-intervention candidate. But at this moment, what this could mean for the Venezuelan people is if there is truly operations in Venezuela that would lead to a change in the government, if they manage to change it and instill an opposition figure, this could very well mean a time of short instability because of how unprepared the country's institutions are to assume the change, because of how the military in Venezuela is almost completely backed by the government. So there would be no armed defense of this transition period. And at the same time, there is also the possibility that the United States might attempt a change of government in Venezuela, but that it may accidentally lead to a change from within the current ruling party. So this could be leading into a time of much uncertainty, especially because there is the armed branch of the current governing party. There is the more institutional and moderate branch. So what I hope the United States understands is that they might be opening a big Pandora's box in Venezuela if they are not careful about how they execute these operations.
Yeah, it's really interesting that we're talking about this right now, but I would like to move on to another topic and turn to the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, who's won the Nobel Peace Prize. She's received the honor in secrecy and today has said she plans to bring her award back home to her country. We have seen her in Oslo. Let's take a listen just quickly to some of what she had to say.
The Maduro regime has waged war on Venezuelans, which has been classified as state terrorism by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and Crimes Against Humanity by the United Nations. Maduro's regime relies on totalitarian regimes from other parts of the world to attack and harm millions of Venezuelans.
Andrea, strong rhetoric there from Maria. What does her Nobel Peace Prize mean for Venezuelans' opposition movement? And given the risks she faces, what message is she sending? And how might the government, Maduro's government, respond to this?
Well, for the Venezuelan opposition movement, this is a massive accomplishment because, as we know, there have been several phases to the opposition movement. There has been Enrique Capriles, there has been Leopoldo Lopez, Juan Guaido, the most recent one. But at this moment, Maria Corina Machado has accomplished something only two Venezuelans in history have done. She's won a Nobel Prize. And at the same time, what this means is that she's playing in a different league, at least in the international state. She will not only be a chapter in Venezuelan history books, but she will also now be part of world history. She's now in a very select group of individuals. And what this does is, of course, this reivindicates not only her close to 18 months that she spent in hiding in Venezuela, but this also gives her the opportunity to have this insane presentation card for all the countries and organizations in the world that should allow her to get important high-impact meetings that clearly visualize the Venezuelan crisis with other countries in the world, so that it takes her cause to new countries. And the most important thing about this new route she must now embark on is that she has to find a way to manage the expectations with the Venezuelan people, which has always been one of the issues regarding the people that don't agree with her within the Venezuelan opposition. And she has to be very careful not to fall into the category of those other leaders that have been forced to flee the country, because at this point, Maria Corina Machado still holds a very favorable acceptance in Venezuela. But if the expectations keep building up and there is no palpable action for the Venezuelan people, she risks also being passed on into the former sense for the opposition.
And I want to just talk to you a little bit more about the geopolitics. It's interesting, the geopolitics around all of this. So President Trump appears to agree with Maria Corina Machado, but at the same time, we have seen President Putin calling Maduro. Putin and Trump seem to be on good terms. How does this all work out? There seems to be a really weird triangle going on here.
Well, there's also a very important point in that triangle that is, of course, China in this equation. We know that the geopolitical chess match that has been played in recent months and in past years has been Venezuela and the United States, China and Taiwan, Russia and Ukraine. And in the last few months, we've seen how the pressure has been scaling up towards negotiation in all of these conflicts. So at this point, with Maduro being at the center of a Putin-Trump relationship, a Maria Corina Machado and Trump relationship, Venezuela has become, of course, not only a negotiating piece in all those other countries that are affected by what the United States' position is within those conflicts, but they are also in the very tough position of just having to resist and wait. Because as we know, Maria Corina Machado has done a great strategy with aligning herself with Donald Trump, even dedicating her Nobel Peace Prize to him. And with her newfound freedom after leaving Venezuela and reaching Oslo, she is now in a golden opportunity for her to not only touch up the European community with the tour that she announced she's going to do, but to end up in Washington, D.C. and directly discuss with Donald Trump.
Absolutely fascinating. Andrea Silva, it's really been great to have you on the show, your insights and your analysis. Let's get more on this with former Trump state campaign chair Rob Artlett. Rob, there's a lot going on at the moment when we have a look at the geopolitics around this, as I was just discussing with Andrea Silva before you. But I want to get your take on this. Did the US military seize an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela to gain control of the nation's oil resources, which we all know are the world's largest crude reserves?
Well, it's always a pleasure and an opportunity to be with you and your audience, so thank you very much for that opportunity. Look, make no mistake that President Trump remains very focused on securing and safeguarding the American people. This is an extension of that mission. And what he is doing is interceding, if you would, these oil tankers, or this specific oil tanker, along with shooting, of course, and destroying small drug boats, if you would. And that's exactly why he is doing this. He believes, through his intelligence and other sources, that these tankers, number one, of course, there is an embargo, correct? I mean, there is not to be any international shipping of the oil, but yet, so that's number one. Number two is, are there drugs on these ships? And so reality is President Trump is making the leader of Venezuela, he's getting his attention, is he not? And I think that's his ultimate goal, because he wants him to stop interceding and interjecting, if you would, illegal and illicit activity, to include drug running and shipping of oil to areas that they're not permitted to. So it's not about capturing their oil or seizing their oil for our use. It's to stop the illegal trafficking of the oil and the illegal trafficking of drugs. It's quite simple.
Okay, so it's basically to get the attention of Maduro to make America safer again. But I don't know if you heard my conversation a little bit earlier I was having with Andreas Silva, and he said the US hasn't thought of repercussions if they put boots on the ground in Venezuela, if there is a regime change in the country and the instability that could actually cause. Now, do you think that the US and Pete Hegseth, who might have done, alleged to have done a double tap on a boat in Venezuela, is actually thinking about the consequences, Rob? Because I haven't heard anything about that coming out of the US.
Well, absolutely. And I think that make no mistake, there are a lot of conversations and a lot of leaders and a lot of strategists that are absolutely strategizing their steps and potential reactions with those steps. And to be very clear on the international waters when it comes to a drug boat, they have every legal right to be doing this. Many in our country, many media outlets in America don't believe that to be the case. But I would tend to lean on Secretary Hegseth and President Trump. They know what the legality is. They know they're right. People may not agree with it. People may not fully understand it. But there was a retired 4-star Army general that was reporting on the news here in America just yesterday, stating people are very confused on this issue for some reason. But our U.S. military has every legal right to be doing exactly what they're doing.
And according to polling from Reuters and Ipsos, a broad swathe of Americans oppose the US military's campaign of deadly strikes on boats. And with slipping approval ratings and the midterms coming up, and we've seen the Democrats win in a few places, should Donald Trump be really focusing on domestic matters at the moment? And of course, he did campaign that there will be no more forever wars that weren't in America's interest. And I just feel like he's pushing for a regime change here, and many people are saying that, and it's distracting from the economic hardships that a lot of American people are facing, Rob.
Yeah, I believe that this is a two-pronged approach by President Trump, meaning that this is an extension of his domestic policies. What are those domestic policies? It's safeguarding the American people at our borders. He's going beyond the borders because these drugs, these ingredients of these drugs on these boats are where do you think they're going to be going?
But Rob, sorry, just a quick question. Are there 100% drugs on these boats? Do they know that for sure, undoubtedly?
I would say yes. And I say that because let's not forget, I come from a former U.S. Navy intelligence specialist. So I understand what the intelligence is and what we do to garner that intelligence. So for me, they're not just going out there shooting any boat for any reason. No, they have intelligence. They have their sources. They have technology. They have satellite information. They know exactly what's on these boats and who's on these boats. That's why they're killing them. That's why they're going after them.
And I just want to switch gears a little bit to something else that's going on in the US. Trump released a new national security strategy, and it was really interesting to read. It was calling for a quick deal in Ukraine and a retreat from bolstering European security. And then the Republican-led House and Senate Armed Services Committees weighed in, reaffirming US support for Ukraine and for NATO. Does this reveal a deepening split in the Republican Party because they don't seem to be agreed on foreign policy?
No, I disagree with that, and I say it's no different than good cop, bad cop. They're working together, right, to achieve the goal, and that is to stop the war. How do you do that? How do you achieve that goal? Well, obviously, both leaders, Putin, along with the Ukrainian leader, well, they're still fighting, are they not? And where is Europe in this effort? Why aren't they stepping up to do more and be involved in more of the war? So I would say President Trump is the bad cop. Meaning he's out there pushing the envelope and understanding, trying to get people's attention. And I think that's exactly what he is doing. Zelensky, he wants his attention. And I think he also wants Vladimir Putin's attention. He wants the war to stop, and I think he will do anything that is necessary to do that, to include making the claim that he will stop supporting Europe as much as perhaps we have. Because why isn't Europe doing more to stop this war? It's in their backyard. It is their neighbor. They have the most to gain and the most to lose by ending of this war. So I believe President Trump is doing all things to get all players involved in this. To the ultimate goal is to stop the bloodshed and stop the war.
I'm hearing you, and I'm also thinking about what analysts and critics have said regarding the US stance when it comes to Russia. And a lot of this is the fact that they're saying that the US is looking to Russia, which is a pariah state, and that 28-point peace plan that was revealed, that was negotiated by Steve Witkoff, who's Donald Trump's financial man and golf buddy, favored Russia. And it basically asked Ukraine to give up everything. And it almost looked to many people that that was a business deal, Rob. And I think the world has looked at this and they're concerned because they are saying Russia is a pariah state. They are testing European countries. The US has always been a massive player in NATO. And since 1945, it's been really important for that foreign policy to support each other. Donald Trump seems to be rolling back on decades and decades of foreign policy, which is scary.
Well, I would say he's doing just the opposite. I think he is strengthening and solidifying the relationship with NATO. I think for far too long, American presidents have looked the other way when NATO does not step up and do their part in the process, both financially as well as militarily. And I think that's exactly what he's doing here. He is not taking the relationship for granted, but he is placing them on notice that they need to do more, as are the agreements and as the agreements have stated. Look, President Trump is a true leader. He's not going to sit back and let the process play out as it has, because it has failed. What he's doing is he's getting their attention, letting them know that they need to do more and be more as designed by the NATO alliance and by the various countries that are involved and included in the NATO alliance. So and I also was a part of a NATO alliance when I was involved in U.S. military. So for me, I encourage and suggest and totally support President Trump in his efforts to have these organizations, NATO. We could also say, NATO, along with the United Nations and others. They need to do more. Why is it always America that has to solve all the world's issues? Why aren't they stepping up and doing what they say they're going to do?
Okay, let's stay on the topic of Europe. And the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, gave a speech today. It was so gloomy, Rob. He's warning allies are Russia's next target, and we must prepare for war our grandparents endured. What do you make of this really gloomy assessment of the situation? Is he actually trying to scare people and scare nations?
It's very possible, but at the same time, I think it does make sense for the European Union, the countries that are involved with the EU, to step up and do more. Again, why are they always looking to America to save the day? And our dollars and our tax dollars and our U.S. military and our soldiers and our sailors to always be the ones to step up and to save them. Why aren't they taking this upon themselves more so? So I am hoping that, yes, President Trump is getting the attention of the EU leaders to do more and to be more for their own people. And I think that also we can talk about the immigration, whereas many people believe that immigration has destroyed Europe. And I think that's also part of the issue here that we could discuss if you were wanting to, if not today, but perhaps another day. But I think Europe, and specifically Britain, just recently, many people believe that Britain has failed and is destroyed because of the mass immigration that has infiltrated their country, and I think that's a big issue as well. So I am glad to see that Europe is perhaps waking up to many things, and we all want them to succeed, but at the same time, they need to have more skin in the game.
You know what? When we have another day, let's talk about immigration, because that's a really interesting topic, especially in Europe and in the UK, and how governments are trying to get on top of it and they just can't seem to. But I want to bring you back to the conversation we're having and just ask you one final question here, Rob, because I don't know about you, but it seems to have been a circus trying to get this peace plan to the table that Russia and Ukraine are going to agree to. OK, let's be honest. There's been a lot of shuttle diplomacy and a lot going on. Are you confident Zelensky will be able to present an updated peace plan to Donald Trump that he will accept and that Russia will be on board with? Because Russia doesn't seem to want to make any concessions whatsoever, and they are the aggressor, and they just think we're on the front foot, so what?
Yeah, I'd like to think so, but again, it won't happen without Trump's involvement in his negotiating skills, and I think at the same time, some believe Zelensky also does not want this war to stop. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think many would perceive him as a bad leader. Many within Ukraine want him to no longer be their president. And I think some believe that he's using this war as an opportunity to receive and obtain a massive amount of money from international countries, to include America, that benefit him, his family, and his circle of friends. So some people believe that he really has no true interest in stopping the war, because it's an opportunity for revenue for him.
Rob Artlett, as always, it's brilliant to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
More than 500,000 residents of disputed border area between Thailand and Cambodia have become displaced as fighting between the two countries continued for a fourth day. Each country is accusing the other of violating international law and breaking a tentative ceasefire agreement reached back in October. Chris Gilbert has the very latest.
This is the fallout of the fighting. After only 4 days, hundreds of thousands of civilians near the disputed border have been forced to flee, ending up in temporary shelters like this one. Families have been separated, as parents were forced to leave their children behind to mind their farms when they evacuated. Resources are scarce. There is particular concern about access to clean food and water.
We've bought some things to eat for only a short period of time, but if this fighting drags on, I'll run out of food for my family. This is the most difficult part, feeding my family.
Cambodia is accusing Thailand of shelling schools, roads and temples like this one in Siem Reap province. Some of these evacuees were caught in the fighting when Thailand attacked a nearby casino.
It was chaotic. So many people, hundreds of people trying to run away. My husband first looked for our children, and it took us a while, but we found them all. My heart was almost broken because I was so scared of getting killed.
Fighting in recent days has reportedly reached the highest intensity since a 5-day skirmish in July. Cambodia is accusing Thailand's military of numerous attacks in the early hours of Thursday, alleging some broke international law by firing on civilians, reportedly killing 10. Thailand says Cambodia has also broken international law by using historical sites as bases. The resurgence of fighting comes less than 2 months after the countries reached a tentative pathway to peace agreement sponsored by US President Donald Trump. Thai and Cambodian leaders say they expect to talk with him again as the fighting rages on. And the growing number of evacuees wait and hope they can one day safely return home. Chris Gilbert, Arabiya English.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. At least 34 people have died and many been injured after Myanmar's military hit a hospital in the Rakhine state. The strike hit a town held by the Arakan army amid a surge in attacks ahead of the country's election later this month. Human rights groups say civilians, including patients, are being directly targeted. Two brothers wanted over a deadly nightclub fire in India's Goa state, which killed 25 people, have been detained in Thailand. Officials say they fled to Phuket after the blaze and will now be sent back for questioning. Their detention comes after a Delhi court refused to grant them protection from arrest as investigators look into claims fireworks did ignite the blaze. President Trump has launched the Gold Card, which is a fast-track US visa for wealthy foreigners willing to pay at least $1 million. The scheme promises a quicker residency and a path to citizenship for those deemed to provide a substantial benefit to the US. Critics say it favors the rich, but Trump says the plan will attract top talent and also create jobs. Elon Musk's SpaceX is planning a major IPO in 2026 that could value the company at more than $1 trillion. The move comes as the company continues to grow rapidly, with Musk aiming to tap public markets for funding. The announcement has Wall Street watching closely ahead of what could be a landmark offering. For more on this, I'm joined from Dubai by Cornelia Meyer, economist and founder of Meyer Resources. Thank you so much for joining me, Cornelia. Elon Musk has actually appeared to confirm reports that his rocket company SpaceX is preparing to go public in the new year. Is it surprising that he's decided to do this?
Well, this is probably, if he wants to do it, it's probably as good a time as any. Was just at the Abu Dhabi Finance Week, and all people were talking about was, hyperscalers, AI, space. So there's a big hype in this space. And no pun intended. And so this is probably as good a time as any. And some analysts say he could raise as many as more than 30 billion, which would make that IPO larger than the so far largest IPO, which was Aramco in 2019, which raised 29 billion.
And it's so funny because that was actually my next question. This could be the biggest IPO of all time, of course, beating Saudi Aramco. But what will this mean for Elon Musk himself? Because he's going to have two of the world's most valuable companies, and that's something fascinating. Have we seen this before? And also, what will critics be saying?
Well, no, I think this is precisely it. And I'm less worried about the critics for him. I'm more worried about the boards, because the boards are going to say, look, you have SpaceX, you have Tesla, then you have X. So you have so many things on your plate. How can you manage it all? How can you add the value? And with Tesla, he was just promised a really huge potential bonus. So it will be very interesting how the boards will react to this. But I would just like to quickly come back to it. It's said that this company could be as large as 1.5 billion valued if it really goes well with this IPO. Then he would have two companies at about 1.5 billion, which is 1.5 trillion, which is 3 trillion, which is 10% of US GDP.
Incredible, isn't it? It's absolutely incredible if he manages to pull this off, and just the volume of those companies and the money. But what will also be quite interesting to see is if he does take it from private to public, the rumors are that he's going to, what will SpaceX then invest its money in? And also, we can't forget there's Starlink too.
Yeah. No, I think, look, there's a lot of demand for cash from in SpaceX. He will want to do further explorations. He will want to put people into space. He will want to put more satellites on. And you mentioned something very important, which is Starlink, because Starlink, there is a sense of how profitable is Starlink really, because in order to make it really work, to make this internet connection just as smooth as it is with cable. He needed to put up so many satellites. So Starlink is, in terms of the finances, a little bit opaque. So, but he will certainly need to put money into Starlink, and he will want to grow his space endeavors exponentially.
And I also just want to say, if the SpaceX IPO happens, how much could this revive the IPO market in the US? How has that been looking this last year? Have we seen more listings or less listings?
Well, we have seen actually in that sort of category, we've seen about 2 to 1 in terms of the funding via private funding versus the funding via IPO. So it will certainly give an impetus. And one of the things is that you saw that a lot of the companies in that space were suddenly got higher valuations with the rumor of the SpaceX IPO.
And just a quick question, do you think Elon Musk ever sleeps? Because I'm not sure he does.
I'm not sure he does. And if he has 2 public companies on his hands, that will certainly reduce his ability to get any sleep.
I know, he's a pretty incredible man, isn't he? He always manages to surprise us. Even had time to get involved in US politics. But Cornelia Mayer, it's great to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Mexico has approved new tariffs of up to 50% on more than 1,000 products. The levies, which will be imposed next year, will apply mostly on Chinese goods like cars and clothing. The move comes as Mexico negotiates with the US over steep import taxes that President Donald Trump has threatened to impose on the country. Now, the US Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates by 25 basis points for the 3rd time this year. The decision to cut rates was not unanimous. Policymakers voted 10-3 to lower the lending rate to about 3.5% to 3.7%. In addition to that rate decision, the Fed also announced tomorrow it will buy Treasury securities worth about $40 billion US. Turning to all the sports news now, and another batch of World Cup tickets have hit the market today. FIFA said nearly 2 million tickets have already been sold for the 48-team tournament, which will be held across the US, Mexico and Canada. This round of ticket purchases will be the first box office sale since last week's draw schedule was revealed. And the 2026 World Darts Championship gets underway today in London. A record 128 players have entered this year's competition, an increase of 32 from last year's extravaganza. The winner of this year's tournament will walk away with £1 million. A reminder of our top stories. Russia's Putin reassures President Maduro of Moscow's support after American forces seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, with Caracas condemning the move as an act of piracy. NATO Chief Mark Rutte has warned that member states are Russia's next target. And Elon Musk's SpaceX is gearing up for a record-breaking IPO that could shake up Wall Street. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. We'll be back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for watching.